So welcome to the community call. This is a monthly community call for the Grafana team, where we share a little bit about what's happening in the Grafana world. So this is live right now, and I'm really excited about chatting with people about what's happening in plugins world specifically today. So this is being recorded. So if you missed this today, you will be able to watch this after. We typically upload the video 1 or 2 days after it's been aired. And yeah, you can access it on YouTube along with all the previous community calls that we've been doing. And we welcome questions pretty much during any time of the call. We will be doing a little presentation, but feel free to raise your hand. There is a little button, I think, somewhere here that it looks like a hand like this. And if you use it, you will raise your hand, and hopefully we'll see it and give you the chance to ask something. Also, we will give plenty of time at the end for extra questions that don't typically, not necessarily have anything to do with the topic at hand. So this is the Plugin Platform Squad. So we are doing a rotational schedule where every squad in the Grafana team is responsible for hosting the community call every month. So we will have different topics and hopefully get to know a little bit more about the team and what they're working on. And today we have the Plugin Platform team. This is actually a pretty good, good-sized team at this point. I feel like it wasn't that long ago since the team was created, and now we're like 8 people now. Unfortunately, not everyone can make it, but we definitely have. Well, I think we have half the team in here at least, so that's awesome. Yeah, I think we have Will, we have Marcus E. We got plenty of Marcuses in the team, yeah. So I will let each team member present themselves when they get the chance to present. Yeah, before we get started with the presentations, I have a few things that I wanted to share. So a few announcements. Some of you might already be aware of this, but we wanted to bring it up again just to make sure that as many as possible are aware. We are deprecating a couple of things for Grafana 9. The first one being Angular plugins. So Angular plugins has been around since, I believe it's Grafana 3. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's a long time now. And, a lot of the most popular ones are Angular plugins. So that is going to mean that in Grafana 9, there's going to be a flag. So by default, it won't actually load the Angular plugins, but you need to enable a configuration to actually load them. Otherwise, you won't see them. And then in Grafana 10, I believe, we will cut off the support altogether. So hopefully that will leave ample time for plugin developers to have migrated over to the React platform, which is honestly a really cool platform. If you haven't tried it out yet, I highly recommend you switching over soon. But now you got a little extra fire under your seat there. Another thing we're deprecating is the API Tsdb query endpoint, which you can use to make queries to really any data source as part of the REST API. I don't know if the team wants to mention a little bit why and like how big of a change this is. I believe it shouldn't be that much to migrate. It should be a fairly straightforward change, right?
Yeah, so I guess I can say something. Will is the one that's been working on it, but basically since Grafana 7, when we introduced official support for backend plugins, we have this component data source with a backend that you are supposed to use. And that one is always calling API/TS query. So API/TSDB query, it's legacy. You can still call it, but But yeah, please stop using it if you're using it. We have been searching a bit around GitHub, for example, and we've found a lot of references to the legacy endpoint. So there can probably be both plugins and like external integrations using this old legacy one. But hopefully, by deprecating, we should make users aware of it. But in regards to whether migrating from using the legacy one to the new one, it should be very straightforward, I would say. Obviously, there are differences in the responses. So API DS query only returns data frames. That's one important thing to mention. I guess there could be, let me put it like this. We released Grafana 8.5. It's basically out there now since today. And this includes the deprecation of the legacy endpoints. And that also means that the documentation for the HTTP API in the latest documentation has been updated. So you can find documentation of API/DS query there. Thank you, Will.
I just shared it there, actually, yeah. For people, so I was just mentioning the proper link hasn't updated, but you can find it under next. And that should be it there.
Yes. And just one thing maybe regarding what you said, Marcus, before, that you use this to query any data source. I would just like to add that that is any backend plugin data source. Just
good point. Good point. So thank you for that. Another thing I want to highlight is that we have been writing a ton of guides. If you're not familiar with the let's see if we can, I can show you. There is the community grafana.com site. If you're not familiar with it, in there we have a plugin development category for all things plugin development. Here you can ask questions on plugin development, and the new thing that we've started doing now is that we have this new share and showcase where both the team is writing helpful tips and tricks on plugin development. But we're also seeing if you're writing a new plugin and you want to share it with the community, maybe how to use it, what it's good for, and so on. Feel free to post there and tell the world about it. But there are already quite a few guides in here for how to use Docker when you're developing plugins, how to debug your backend plugin, and a lot of good stuff. So we try to add more as we go along. We try to keep track of what people are asking about, and common troubleshooting things that people struggle a little bit with. We try to include it here. So if you haven't checked it out, please do so. And might also add that the team has been busy adding a few more plugin examples. So please check out the plugin, the Grafana/Grafana plugin examples repository here. So we've been adding a few more. If you're interested in app plugins, you'll be pleased to know that there's a example there for app plugins as well. So
yeah,
feel free to.
That's well done. I was waiting for that for years.
Yeah. Well, I hope it will be useful to you. By now, I know that you're ahead of the curve. You've already developed a few of your own, but this is great for just getting started. So I think on to the next topic, which is going to be reducing unintentional breaking changes in plugin APIs. So this is something that we've been working on lately for past few months, especially I think Q4 was this was a big topic for us. And Marcus is going to, oh, perfect. I was going to just talk a little bit about that.
Yes. You can see my screen, right? I hope.
Yeah, that's good.
Great. So breaking changes. A bit of a background first. So one of the major goals for our squad in Q4 2021 was to find a way to deal with breaking changes in Grafana front-end plugin APIs. So currently and in the past, we have community and commercial plugins that rely on these APIs that we expose and document. So until now, the process of finding out if the change is breaking, that would be a change in Grafana, basically breaking plugins. And if someone is affected by it, was very manual, and it was more of a gut feeling than something we had control over. So I guess end of last year, we started this discussion to discuss mitigating breaking changes in plugin APIs. And well, there's a link in these slides if you're interested to have a look at this later. But what I basically want to summarize it with was that was a lot of discussion towards end-to-end tests or integration tests. But in general, that would require, so given that we would like, when we do changes to Grafana, we would like to basically run checks in pull requests to get an idea of whether a change is breaking any plugins. So given like end-to-end tests or integration tests, that would basically require all plugins to implement end-to-end tests. And with all plugins, I mean all community plugins. And with that, we would have to run those in a simple manner on each pull request in Grafana, which is not really trivial and quite hard. So as a first step, we opted for another approach. So we built this tool called Levitate. And this is a tool that can scan any NPM package or basically any TypeScript code and highlight breaking changes. It's Apache 2 licensed, and you can find the link to the repository if you're interested. So Levitate is basically built currently to do 3 different things. You can compare exports of different NPM package versions. You can list imports or exports of NPM package. So that's basically it. And what we have done is we currently have Levitate running on all of Grafana's pull requests and informs developers when they introduce a potential breaking change. So what you can see here is an example in a pull request where Levitate has found a possible breaking change. And there's a link there as well, but basically you can get to the output of a GitHub action, and then you will get the output from Levitate. So here are basically 3 examples of what Levitate can find. So for example, if you have removed any exported members in a package, you will get a detailed view of all the removals that has happened. So that would be a breaking change. Whether an existing member has been changed, that's also a breaking change. Levitate will also show that. But if there's no additions, removals, or changes, that means basically no breaking changes. All right. So besides running Levitate continuously on all pull requests, we are actually also collecting information about what APIs the plugins in our plugins catalog uses. So this helps us to make more data-driven decisions around breaking changes and also adoption of our front-end APIs. So in the screenshot below, there's a Grafana dashboard that we built based on this data. and it shows the number of imports of a certain property from a certain npm package. So for example, the Grafana data or the Grafana UI package. So with this, given that you want to or need to do a breaking change, we can use this and search for the specific property that we're looking into removing to get a good view of how many plugins and exactly which plugins are actually using this. So that's very helpful. Okay, let's see. So the possible future steps of this, we probably want to add more information to pull requests in Grafana. For example, how many plugins will be affected by the change, or exactly which plugins. And I guess the most important part here for sharing this with the community is that we also would like to offer plugin developers a possibility to check which Grafana version their plugin will be really compatible with using this tool. So yes. And yeah, there's a link to the slides in the doc for this meeting. So you can find the links if you're interested to learn more about this. Is there any questions?
I really like the number 2 when from previous slide, when you can actually will know which plugin is compatible with, right? Because right now we kind of say, oh, it's like a plugin JSON file. It's kind of compatible with version 7 or version 8, yeah. Right? But you never do the backtest of it. Like, I never do it. So unless someone complains that something is not working, then I'll take a look. So how we can actually use it with Levitate? If I develop the plugin, right? Is it automatic, or I have to use it as a part of CI?
So currently, it's only used in Grafana itself.
Okay.
So that's why I put it under possible future steps to offer it to plugin developers. But with that said, you could basically use Levitate with this currently. I'm not so sure if that answers your question, but basically the story around what you want to do is part of our future ideas.
Okay. I mean, if you can create a GitHub action, which allow me to use it, right, as a part of my continuous integration, like what Marcus did before, it will be great. Yep.
Yes. So I guess we can move on to the next topic, which is...
I just have one question then. So the workflow that you could potentially do today is that you, as a plugin developer, you use Levitate on your machine just to, see, is there anything I should be aware of, right? I could do that today. It might not check my specific plugin, but I could already today check using Levitate breaking changes between 2 versions of Grafana Toolkit, correct?
I guess so.
If you go back to your screenshot, you're comparing 2 versions of Grafana. So I could do that just to get, like, let's say that my plugin is using Grafana 8.1.3. And yep. I'm considering my upgrading to the latest version, but I want to know ahead of time whether something is going to break. So I could do that already, can I?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
But it's all manual, right? So you kind of have to know what you're looking for to understand that. Is it? I mean, but can you do something? Because right now, I mean, a lot of plugins develop to version 7, and for the iteration, right, you always depreciate some kind of like location services, for example, which was depreciated recently. Promises was changed recently as well. How we can track it properly? Is there a way to track it, or is it going to be a way to do it?
So I mean, right now, the best advice I can give you is to change logs and release notes, I guess. But our hope is to automate this and provide this to plugin developers eventually, so that you don't have to do anything manually.
Right.
With, for example,
yeah, go ahead.
With, for example, a GitHub action.
Okay, the problem is right now with the plugins development, you in the changelog, you can see everything at a high level what changed actually. But as soon as you started to develop, like I have some plugins applications which use low code functions. You never know what is break unless you kind of test it with every release, and it's time consuming.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. But that makes me think that maybe we should start using Levitate in our releases to actually extract what all the changes are, maybe. But you could basically do that now, as Marcus explained, if you want to know what changed between certain Grafana npm packages, certain versions. So yeah, please try that out, Michael, and let us know if anything is not working as expected. That would be very helpful, because yeah, we basically only use this internally. I'm not sure that many people externally are aware of this tool. So
how generic is it? Can I use it with any npm package, or is it just Grafana?
Yeah, I think so. It's very generic.
One thing I'd like to mention too is, like, as part of this whole initiative that Marcus mentioned that we kicked off last year, was kind of figuring out in general, like, how we ended up in a place where we're constantly breaking things, and what we're hoping, and one of the most conscious things we're trying to do is, as well as this tool, is like stop doing that, like stop having patch releases where we break something, and this is the tool that stops that. So hopefully, Mikael, you won't see like, oh, I just updated a patch version and this little thing I'm using is now broken. That should hopefully be a thing in the past. And this Levitate tool is hopefully going to get us closer and closer to that, where it'll be hyper clear what has changed. And if so, that would ideally be like a major or a minor release, not a patch version or anything like this.
Okay, thank you.
Great. All right, so I guess moving on to the next topic, which is a little bit related, I guess. So with the plugin examples that Marcus mentioned before, we've actually added a couple of integration tests right there. So as you may know, Grafana Toolkit supports running integrations or end-to-end tests using Cypress. So if you implement end-to-end tests, you can use Grafana Toolkit to run them. So let's see here. We have basically the panel basic and data source basic, including integration tests right now. I will jump into them in a sec. But the panel basic includes some tests for viewing or editing panel using screenshot comparison. And the data source basic plugin has tests of configuring and querying a data source. And maybe to make it even more clear, with Cypress, you basically run tests using a web browser. All right, so let's just have a quick look at this panel basic integration tests.
So just to clarify that, instead of unit tests, you're actually firing up Grafana in a browser, and you're actually running the thing as a user would.
Exactly. And so in this example, we have a test viewing a panel with time series data. It should display a good looking graph. And I guess it does its magic to find the panel and take a screenshot of it. And then it will compare the screenshots. And there is a screenshot to compare with. stored since before. So when you run it again, it will be compared to an earlier one. So that's the whole idea with comparing screenshots in these tests. And there's a similar one for editing a panel, which is similar. The other one, data source basic, doesn't do any screenshot comparison. It's more like unit tests, but as Marcus said, an actual web browser is spun up together with Grafana. So you basically navigate inside Grafana, and in this example, you can test by configuring your data source, like the configuration interface, and assure that that works as expected. And the other example is similar, but for querying a data source. There's a couple of different tests. Oh, this was actually quite a few tests. But yeah, we are planning to add more tests to this repository. So watch out for them. But let's see. Let's jump to the next one. Oh, yeah. So what we've done in this plugin examples repository is that we've also set up continuous integration using a GitHub action. So what is interesting with these are that, well, let me see. Well, as I showed you before, we had basically a couple of different tests for 2 different plugins. But with the setup of this continuous integration, we run it against various versions of Grafana. So first of all, we run it against the minimum version of Grafana specified in the plugin.json. So for example, if the version is greater or equal to 8.3.4, we test against 8.3.4. Secondly, we run it against the latest stable version of Grafana. And thirdly, the latest Canary packages and latest Canary version of Grafana, since that allows us to catch bugs in toolkit and end-to-end packages or runtime errors not picked up by Levitate. So we can have a look at this example as well. So here we basically have integration test for the panel basic and for data source basic that we just looked at. And going through the output here, you can see start integration test using expected versions, start integration test using latest version of Grafana. So normally when you run Cypress, you will get an output like this. Guess we'll come back later how you can basically run end-to-end tests more interactively, or I will at least share a link to that. But yeah, these integration tests basically, as I said, run the tests against 3 different versions of Grafana. And so regarding creating integration tests, that's something we really recommend the community to consider, to start doing. It will increase the quality of your plugin. It will assert that your plugin works as expected with different Grafana versions. Given the next step that I will soon mention. But this could also help the Grafana developers understand if a breaking change has been introduced, in case that Levitate didn't catch that, for example. So regarding the next steps, the integration test for the plugin examples is something that we would like to run regularly, maybe each day or something like that, to spot any issues with breaking changes. And then again, regarding plugin developers, I guess the most interesting thing here is to provide this integrations workflow into a GitHub action so that plugin developers can add that to their project to run plugin integration tests continuously. And yes, here are some additional information that you can find. I mentioned you could run end-to-end tests in different ways, and that would be in these guides here. And I guess this is probably something we should try and migrate to the actual documentation, not having it in the Grafana repository. So yeah, we'll let you know when we've done that. So yeah, that was basically what I want to say. And is there any questions regarding this?
It's actually great. This is what I was talking about, that it can help you to see the difference between different versions and test it, right? See if all the versions still working. So I have to start using it. I'm using Jest, but I saw in plugin example that you started to do Cypress.
All right. So yeah, I guess one more thing to mention. As I said, we would like to provide an out-of-the-box experience for plugin developers. Just use an existing GitHub action, for example. But if you're interested to do this now, you should be able to, based on the GitHub Actions workflow specification here, you should be able to come up with something similar for your plugin, if you're interested in that. So that could be helpful.
Yeah, I'll test on my open source plugins, see how it goes.
Yeah, cool. Please do.
So one important thing to note for the Cypress tests is to have stable data. So if you're querying a data source and it returns different data every time, or if you're doing like the last 30 minutes or something, you'll get different screenshots. So it'll be very frustrating. So if you have a test environment you're querying, you may want to set a specific time range that you know what the values are going to be all the time. And for like a panel plugin, then using something like Marcus's static data source is really nice because you can set that up with some fixed queries and you'll always know the results. So your panels will be easier to test that way. It's probably been the biggest challenge we've had for a data source and end-to-end tests is having that stable data set and trying to query our real backend and not mock the backend completely.
Thank you. Static data store is a lifesaver. I use it all the time for panel plugins.
Love it.
Yes. So one related thing that I was planning to maybe talk about that at a later stage, but now since we talked about it, or I would say it's somewhat related. It's not really the same. And so I'm in the Grafana plugin SDK Go now, experimental package, something that's being worked on is this idea of an HTTP traffic logger, which is currently right now for local debugging. But I was just thinking about, I will add a link here. Maybe we can add it to the doc for anyone that's interested. But when we talked about this a little bit, I came to think about end-to-end tests. Like it's quite tricky to do end-to-end tests with data source plugins, or at least from Grafana's perspective. If Grafana would like to run end-to-end tests for a lot of different plugins, maybe all the community plugins. So like if, I guess it depends on what we want to test with end-to-end tests or integration tests. But if we're fine with testing the browser and data being returned from Grafana's API, then maybe we could mock away the the actual data source handling that is happening, like between a request coming into Grafana's API and backend data source being called, processed, and return data frames. Like, what if we can cut that middle step and just return data directly for the HTTP API? So that could maybe be a way to write end-to-end tests for data source plugins to test the actual UI experience, so to speak. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but yeah, just want to mention.
How we can use these experimental features? Is it out of the box?
So right now, I'm not sure if it's ready.
It
So that's
should be ready in 8.5. I was discussing with the author today. His name's Todd. He's on a different team. He's on the observability squad, but he's been working on this, and we're hoping to get it in a patch of 8.5. I'm not sure exactly how usable it is in its current state, but at least in 8.5.1, we're hoping to make it pretty straightforward out of the box. And you can see even in this README here, it gives you a pretty clear idea of how straightforward it is to configure Grafana to just make this work. So yeah, we're hoping very soon. But yeah, in the meantime, I think by the time people read up on the docs, we should be good to go.
Yep. So I will stop presenting. Is that fine?
So it feels like, you might ask yourself, like, why are we doing all this to catch breaking changes? Aren't we the plugin platform squad? Doesn't it, like, aren't we the one that's actually developing the plugin platform? Shouldn't we be able to see this? But I think the important part here is that the API is actually developed by the whole Grafana team. So we have observability squads, we have the user essential squad, we have several squads that are all working on this, and we want to catch anything that affects, if one squad adds or changes the API, we want to detect whether that is compatible with a change that another squad has done. So you might think, like, why are we even doing this? And it's tricky to keep track of, all the changes that's being made throughout the entire Grafana team, and making sure they're all working together.
Makes sense. Grafana loves the 800 people. It's too big. No.
Yeah, the plugin API is actually quite big. There's a lot of features and functionality in it. So hopefully we'll see less and less of these breaking changes, or I should say unintentional breaking changes. Obviously, there are going to be some breaking changes in the future, in order to keep innovating and to keep improving Grafana, but we want to make it intentional. We want to, anytime we make a breaking change, we want to have clear documentation. We want to be able to tell you exactly how to mitigate it and what to do instead. And we also want to be really clear about what value that breaking change brings. So we're not just breaking things for the sake of it. So it's definitely a big step in being a little more responsible for what we do.
That makes sense. I know that Grafana 9 is coming, right? And it's kind of, it will be on Grafana Con when it's going to be released. Is it going to be, but there's going to be no private release, right, before? How we can get prepared for what is coming in Grafana 9?
Brace yourself.
Right, but there is no way, right? You just have to fix it on the fly.
So we are currently working on Grafana 9, and we are making releases every day. So you can test against the Grafana that is right now, or is this You can use the is it main or master these days?
Main
Yeah.
branch.
So
And
you
there's
can go
Docker
against
images.
yeah. If you use the Docker image for the main tag, you should get the most up to date one. So if you want to try it out, use that one. But there, yeah, we are gonna create the tag before GrafanaCon, but you should be able to use it from any tag we publish on Docker Hub.
Okay. Is it all the changes in main right now, or there are still some side changes which is not in main?
Well, we're currently working on a number of features that might not be merged yet, but as we get closer, more and more will obviously get done. And some of it is behind feature flags already, but not quite there yet, I believe. So,
okay. So main is the way to go.
I'm sorry?
So main is the way to go. I mean, testing against the main branch. Okay. This is what I do normally.
Yeah, I think that's it's we're not in the, we don't like of just working in secrecy and then just do a big bang release and then see what everyone how it crashes people's environments. We want to develop Grafana in the open and all the commits to the main branch is going to be published so you can run it.
We'll also do a beta release several weeks before 9.0. So at that point, you shouldn't expect, unless there's a major bug that needs fixing, you shouldn't expect API changes from the beta, which should be 2 or 3 weeks before release.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe one thing to mention, if you're using Docker and the main tag, so that would obviously change version every time you restart your Docker image. So it could introduce weird things, bugs, and so on. So like if you want to run this in an environment where you want to have a bit more of stability, I would recommend you to use a tag which is an actual Git commit. I think that would be the Grafana/Grafana dev Docker image, if I'm not mistaken. At least it was before. But yeah.
Also say from painful personal experience, like main is main. I would not run that in if it's, let's say that you have something that you would care if the meta database got corrupted, not a place I would run main. Be straight with that.
Very good point.
Yeah, I already have experience running with main. When you run it, see something is not working, you come back to that in a couple of hours, and it's already started to work. Like, okay. That's great. Thank you, guys.
I'm curious, Mihai, were you asking about Grafana 9 more from a curiosity of new features to come or like a fear of what we might break?
Fear what might break, because I have to fix some things in Grafana 8, so I just want to be prepared.
Yeah.
Not like when they're going to be conference, I want to enjoy the conference and learn as much as I can instead of fixing things.
Yeah, I think this is the first major release that will be hyper aware of things like this, thanks to the tooling and all the testing stuff we have now in place. So I would hope that, yeah, we're not in a place where all of a sudden you hit the stable version for 9 and something's broken. It should be really crystal clear what has changed in the API and how that affects your plugins. And yeah, based on the feedback, even just listening today of the questions you ask, I think it gives us some good ideas of what we can start to put in place by using some of these things together to share with people to say, hey, run this just before we release this thing to the wild, to give you a clear idea of how your plugin is affected, if it is at all,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when you have 1, 2 plugins, it's easy to test. When we have more, and especially when we go to applications with, I have 6 panels inside of it and a couple of data sources, which is when it became harder to test all the changes. And you need automation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Totally. Automates everything.
Yeah, I try to get 90% coverage for everything I do, but not sometimes it's not the case. But with the Cypress, I think we can make it to the next level.
Yep. Yeah, and as I said before, our goal is obviously to provide these tools to make it easier for plugin developers to automate things, obviously.
Is there any way we can make backend plugins on Typescript in future, not in Go?
I think there's an experimental repository in the Grafana org.
I remember that.
Yeah, I think there's one in Rust as well.
Yeah, we actually have one,
C#.
which maybe not many are aware of, but the image renderer plugin is written in TypeScript.
But is it something we can use?
I mean, it's not something we recommend. Go is the most easiest and straightforward thing because you're compiling everything down to a single binary. With TypeScript, like the first issue that comes to mind is you need to have Node installed on the same server as Grafana, which is non-optimal.
Mm-hmm.
So with the image renderer, we had to use some packaging thing to bundle everything together in a single binary. But that has also been very, what do you say, fragile, I would say. So, but yeah, it's there is a repository, as Marcus mentioned, and we're not officially supporting it, but you can do it if you want to live on the.
I should add though that we're currently not considering backend plugins written in any other language than Go for publishing to Grafana.com. And the reason being that Go is really nice that way. You compile it down to like a single binary that you can run without any dependencies. Whereas if you're building a plugin using Java, for example, then our Grafana Cloud instances need to run a specific version of Java or C# or like any language that you choose, essentially Python, for example, and we would have to do the version management of that essentially. So we currently don't have any plans of supporting any other languages for that reason on Grafana.com, I should say. Obviously, if you're developing internal plugins within your organization, by all means, go nuts. It's gRPC. You implement it in any language you feel like. But currently, we don't have any way of publishing it if you want to make it public.
Okay, makes sense.
Yes. I just wanted to add that it's obviously something that is on our radar. So like we are discussing these things internally, but
yeah, if you have Mikhail, if you have the brilliant solution to this, we're all ears. And what we've seen so far, it's just going to be a lot of work, and we haven't gotten to that work yet.
I mean, for me, we talked with Marcus about it already. That I mean, if I have an idea about data source plugin, I normally start with the front end part only because it's so easy to prototype it. And then if it's something interesting I want to do, or it's only can be done with the backend, I use the Go. But if you use, I'm looking for TypeScript only because it's kind of same experience. What you do on front end, what you do on back end, you have the same classes, you have everything kind of. Because right now you do twice the job. You spend twice the time to do the Go and then the front end part. So with the TypeScript, it will be easier to streamline. And with the Node is not for me, it's not a problem because if you run it in Docker, in container, you normally have a Docker there on Node, right? You can install it. So
yeah,
I would love to have TypeScript.
It's obviously not trivial to ask a plugin developer to learn 2 languages. For a lot of developers out there, they have their hands full just learning 1 language. So we definitely understand this. And we like Jay mentioned, we are considering this internally and how we want to approach this, because it just merely from a developer experience perspective and making it easier to build these plugins.
Yeah, well, I'd just like to add something there on what Mikael said. There's like, yeah, we use TypeScript internally to build our plugins, and it's quite useful to know about the situation with Go and how you guys want that from a publishing point of view. So very useful to know. As I say, we use TypeScript because it's just much easier from us in terms of getting developers who can actually get started on that. It's just easier.
Right.
And then of course, if we have to go later on, then you can make that decision.
Yeah, exactly. So are you saying that you are using TypeScript for backend plugins? No.
No, front end. I mean,
front end.
Front end and a bit of back end. Yeah.
I really like to use routes using the HTTP proxy, and it works great for front end.
Yeah,
The
obviously alerting is very attractive for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's right.
I-
But I just wanted to mention that, I mean, when you're looking to this TypeScript and Go, it's easier when you do only get, when you only receive the data. But what we started to do a lot lately is doing delete, post, and put to modify the data. And it's kind of very time consuming to do both parts for that. So this is why TypeScript will be the best.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. It really helps us understanding, you sharing how you're using the API really helps us understand what we should focus on, and it's super helpful. So I really appreciate you letting us know. And another way of, you don't have to wait all the way to next time the plugin platform hosts these the community call. You can head either into the plugins channel on our Slack team, or you can head to the community forum as well. And we obviously would love to hear how you're using the plugin API and what struggles you're facing. And obviously we want to try to help you, but we understand that not all the things that are supported at the moment. So, but we still want to hear them. We still want to know what you'd like to do with the API. So feel free to share that as well.
Okay.
Cool. Any final questions? We have a couple of minutes left.
I got one. It's not sort of specific. It's about a specific plugin that's on the system, which is we're trying to do non-linear histograms, but we're passing in data that is sort of in pre-computed buckets, and it doesn't seem to be a way of doing that. I think you can do it with a time series, but I just wonder if there's any sort of plans to add a sort of ability to do a non-linear histogram at all as a plugin, as a sort of thing.
So are you asking if there is a built-in visualization that could support it?
A built-in visualization. Yeah, for that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we are working on the next generation of histogram visualization for Grafana. So I think this is actually something that I would love to know about, that people are asking for it. Jay, do you know? I think it's Leon, right? The Edge team working on it.
Yeah, I'm not close to the latest work on that, but this is a great question. So
Yep.
I will go and dump it in the right people's lap, and then we'll see what comes of it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can actually add to that my client actually asked me to maybe rewrite the histogram panel because he doesn't like what we have right now. So if we can get this feedback to you and improve the histogram panels, so we don't create anything ourselves, it'll be great. I can get the feedback from the client what he wants.
So I could add another thing. We recently had a new panel plugin published called the Mosaic plot. It's on the grafana.com right now. I don't know if that's supported in it. I would have to check closer, but if that's, I would recommend that you look into that one. It's a really cool plugin. pretty feature rich, I would say. I can drop a link to it as well.
Yeah, I will review it one day when I'm in my next weekly review.
Looking forward to hear what you think. I'll post it in the chat here, and I'll put it in the document as well.
Yeah, but it looks great.
Okay, with that, we're coming up on the hour. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been great. A lot of good feedback that we'll definitely take with us. And again, this will be uploaded to YouTube. So if you had any teammates that couldn't attend, feel free to link it to them. We'll just visit our YouTube account, and there will be a playlist with Grafana community calls, and you can find it there. So I will say next month, the Observability Experience Squad will talk about Explore and features related to it. So check back if that's interesting to you. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.